The appearance of the fear as anxiety tens of millions of years ago initiated a new era in the history of the entire cosmos, the era of a being existing in the symbolic dimension. In such a dimension, exactly in this dimension, that is, in the dimension of the symbolic reality, no human like being can exist anywhere else in the cosmos. It's unlikely that the story of life elsewhere in the cosmic space and this life there exists for sure, that this story would happen there in the same way as it did here on Earth. It's a very long story, and each stage of this story is a condition for the next stage to occur. It's a history of nearly 4.5 billion years of life development. It took so long for the conditions for the anxiety mutation to happen. It took so long for the evolution of organisms from the unicellular cells to the primates with a wonderfully developed central nervous system, especially the brain. Such a brain, as an indivisible whole, could become an instrument emitting the spontaneous electromagnetic waves, and then, as a result of the anxiety mutation, an instrument emitting non spontaneous, deliberate electromagnetic waves. The fear as anxiety is the result of the first spontaneous and continuous wave forming activity of the brain. This is where its pricelessness lies in the perspective of the appearance of symbolic reality. The brain itself is not the pinnacle of the organism's evolution. Animals at much lower levels of the evolutionary development already have it. The fishes, the amphibians, and the reptiles have it. And of course, the brains of these animals also emit spontaneous electromagnetic waves. Nothing fancy about it. Wherever can an electric current flow, an electromagnetic wave is generated. And every cell, especially a nerve cell, is a kind of an electric conductor. The nervous excitation is carried out by the flow of these electric charges and therefore identical to the cable that conducts electricity to the bulb, electric bulb. And around this cable there appears an electromagnetic field. Meanwhile, very primitive organisms already have thousands of neurons. Water jellyfish has 20,000 of them. The man has hundreds of billions. So the flow of charges in the gigantic electrical grid creates an electromagnetic field that is registered as the brain waves. But in all animals except humans, it's only a spontaneous electromagnetic field, the result of the flow of the electrical stimuli in thousands, millions, and billions of nerve cells. The brain of all these animals are just a more or less thick cable around which an electromagnetic field arises as a result of the electric flows. In humans, the brain, in addition to the function of a thick cable, thanks to the anxiety mutation and its subsequent adaptation, plays also the role of the TV and the radio set. For this to be possible, this brain has had to develop over the past 20 million years or so from a passive cable which wraps billions of cells conducting electrical excitation to a device that exhibits its own activity in the form of the emission of intentional electromagnetic waves. These developed over the last 20 million years deliberate electromagnetic waves generated with an incredible precision, comparable to the precision with which a musician generates sounds and music on an instrument. These waves are thoughts. These waves are the symbolic reality. It's a new dimension of existence. This dimension does not exist anywhere else in the cosmos because it's a dimension that is inextricably linked only with the man here on Earth. So it's also infinitely less possible, just to say impossible, outside of Earth. Therefore, when looking for an extraterrestrial intelligence, by which most of us understand the intelligence of a kind of the human symbolic intelligence, we are doomed to failure, and such a research should be abandoned. Of course, it can be hypothetically assumed, for the purposes of the academic discussion, that in the infinity of cosmic galaxies, a similar history of evolution could have happened, and as a result, just like on Earth, animals would appear equipped with such an advanced central nervous system as in the humans, and that the brains of these extraterrestrial creatures would also experience this extraordinary awakening, thanks to which they would learn to produce symbolic expressions. That is, they would simply learn to think. Of course, everything is possible in the cosmic space, since it's infinite. Even here on Earth, everything is possible from a probabilistic point of view. Nevertheless, experience shows that if something is possible with a low, or especially an extremely low probability, then it's practically impossible. All the more so small is the probability that somewhere in the cosmic space there would be planets with conditions identical to those on Earth for hundreds of millions of years, and consequently the same life as on Earth could also appear there, a life that over the course of 4.5 billion years passed the very path from the primary spontaneous cellular structures to the organisms with such a sophisticated organ as the human brain, capable of emitting the purposeful electromagnetic waves with a precisely set frequency and length, the wave, the waves carrying the expression of symbolic objects. Another thing is, however, that the nature does not know one-off phenomena. This would argue, however, that there may still be brain-like objects that, like the human brain, can emit deliberate electromagnetic waves carrying information. Moreover, the probability that they exist is bigger not in the space, but on Earth. Since I claim, which is not my personal judgment only, but a phenomenon known to all researchers and observers of the nature, that all the natural events are never one off, but they like to repeat with a bigger or smaller frequency, then it's impossible for the anxiety mutation to occur only once, more than 20 million years ago. I believe it happens much, much more often than we might expect. Why? The mutations are inscribed in the very essence of the mechanism of the functioning of the genetic material in the form of DNA. This mechanism is almost made to be mutated. Anyone who remembers the basics of the genetics knows that genes are just the sequence of certain chemicals that is assembled into a long band of DNA, or actually two bands of DNA, both almost identical. The formation of the reproductive cells consists in the separation of these bands. They are also partially disentangled each time to create the proteins needed for all the metabolic processes, because the pattern for creation of these proteins is precisely in a gene, the sequence of the DNA strand. Well, it doesn't work, however, flawlessly. On the contrary, errors occur at different stages of the DNA strand unraveling and the formation of a new strand based on the old one. These errors are mutations. There is no doubt that the fear gene mutation has been and is happening in all other animals equipped with the fear gene in both bands of DNA. As I mentioned before, each gene is duplicated, one on each band of DNA. Even insects are already equipped with this gene. So even insects and all animals that follow them evolutionarily may hypothetically present a mutated fear gene. That's the anxiety. Of course, one more condition must be met: the existence of a brain, even primitive one. Insects also meet this condition. So why? From the beginning of the presentation of my General Psyche Relativity Theory, I persistently insist that fear, as anxiety, is only a human trait and that no other species in the world have it. And at this point, please pay attention because it matters what I say now. It's about a nuance that many of the critics of my anxiety theory of the human psyche do not understand or notice. Well, there is no doubt that the anxiety mutation has been, is happening, and will happen for many hundreds of millions of years. That is, since the organisms equipped with the fear gene and the more or less complicated brain appear. So, of course, it's possible to meet a bee, a fish, an amphibian, a reptile, any mammal with mutated one of two or even mutated extremely rare but entirely probable two fear genes. In other words, we can meet animals, even insects, that show the fear as anxiety. Then why do I say that the anxiety is only human? Here is an extremely important detail, a nuance that explains everything. Namely, the animals that show the anxiety because they are equipped with a mutated fear gene remain only mutants within their knowing no anxiety species of animals. And even if a new fearless species of or fishes or amphibians or mammals have emerged, they have not achieved such a dizzying environmental success as the human species. What follows is that the anxiety alone would not be enough for for the other animal, for the other animals knowing no anxiety to be as successful as the human species. In addition to the mutated fear gene, there must be more to have a planetary success. There must be, for example, a brain that can learn fully a lesson of the anxiety. It's a lesson in the deliberate electromagnetic brain wave emission. The evolution of the organisms is not just an idea to rank all living creatures on Earth. Evolution is not Darwin's property. It's a natural process that will never end, a process of a better and better adaptation and expansion of the living organisms on Earth, starting with the first spontaneous, yet inorganic forms similar to the cells. It's an arranged in time, increasing complexity and advancement of all structures of the organisms. Evolution is happening anytime, anywhere. It develops in all possible directions. One of these directions was the evolution of the nervous system. And in this case, the human species turns out to be its peak achievement for the last several thousand million years. But the human species is not such a peak achievement when it comes to, for example, the evolution of other systems, such as the muscles, the skeletons, etc. We can consider the human brain to be the peak moment in the evolution of the nervous system precisely because of how our brain was able to use the mutation of the fear gene. It used it so well, unlike other animals, that the human species became a separate species of the monkeys, a species of the anxiety monkeys. This has not happened in the case of other species of animals, in which we can assume with absolute certainty that such mutations also took place and are taking place all the time. This has not happened in the case of other species of animals, in which we can assume with absolute certainty that such mutations also took place and is taking place all the time. So the anxiety alone is not enough for an animal to enter the new dimension of the existence. What is still needed is a brain that is advanced in terms of evolution, a brain which will use such a mutation to jump into the new dimension of existence, the symbolic dimension.